A wreck at Bush River Road at St. Andrews Road. 77 is having big problems today. Got one on northbound side at Alex Sanders Bridge there over the river, and then one on the northbound side just after Decker Boulevard, exit 13, and one just before Blythewood Road. An accident at all of those locations on I-77 this morning. Your weather outlook for today, well, it's going to be hot. Your heat index for today, 110 degrees. So that means, it's going to be terrible. Best thing to do, stay inside and drink a lot of water. And then for tomorrow, we will have a high of 95, 90 for Friday. Better chance of those showers on Friday and Saturday. Maybe it'll cool things off. Saturday's high will be 93 degrees. Both days about a 42% chance of rain.
Nine o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game. As we navigate through the month of July, closing in on SEC Media Days coming up starting next Monday, where we'll hear from Coach Beamer as well as the collection of players that the Gamecocks going to be taking along. Big 12 Media Days going on this week, and trust me, we have some things to get to from what was said in day one out there in Las Vegas. Dion has not even taken to the podium yet, and there is already plenty of buzz of what was said at Big 12 Media Days yesterday, and we'll get into some of that as the show goes along, as we continue this countdown to college football finally getting here. 52 days until we see South Carolina squaring off against Old Dominion in Williams-Brice Stadium on August 31st. That means if you're a Week 0 believer like myself, unlike Wes Mitchell, who's a staunch denier of Week 0, that means only 45 days until we see college football being played. Meaningful college football, that is. You do have Florida State and Georgia Tech, that Week 1 game, or Week 0 game, over there in Ireland, and then it is full steam ahead. You're going to have games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all the way through Monday of Labor Day, with wall-to-wall college football, and then we are truly off and running to see who is going to be the national champion in the first year of the 12-team college football era. We spent the past couple of days talking a lot about our guy Phil Steele and his preseason guide, which is the, go-to for everything when it comes to college football, especially getting ready for the season, because Phil Steele does it better than anybody when it comes to the thorough breakdowns and the examinations of these teams from point A to point Z, really, when it comes to those breakdowns. And making our way through the catalog yesterday in the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, Wes brought up something very interesting in this catalog. And that is what Phil Steele calls his projected units, and particularly the area of most improved. And when it comes to the most improved offensive rush units in all of college football, Phil Steele put South Carolina number 1 on that list. So basically what he's saying is that South Carolina is not going to be the best rushing unit in the country. They're not going to average more yards than everybody else. They could. That'd be great. But he's not necessarily making that prediction. He's just saying, compared to where they were a year ago, they should have the best improvement out of any team in the country, which that's pretty high praise, all things considered, especially considering the fact that South Carolina was 129th in rush offense efficiency a season ago. And, if you weren't paying attention to the numbers, it probably felt about that way when you consider how effective South Carolina was when it came to running the football. Again, 85 yards per game average through 2023. And it's an easy prediction to make, I feel like, when you look at what South Carolina has done to the running back room just this offseason alone. A year ago, we were going into the season talking about, man, I really hope this guy from Division II and Mario Anderson ends up working out. I hope, DeCarrion Joyner, somebody that had never played the running back position before, is going to be able to make the transition into being a running back, and then we'll see what happens after that with guys like Juju McDowell and true freshmen from a season ago like DJ Braswell. It obviously ended up not going all that well, considering the fact where South Carolina ended up at the end of last year. But this offseason, they've addressed that position, like so many others on this team, in the transfer portal. Where they went out, they got Rocket Sanders, who, again, 2 seasons ago before his injury was arguably one of the, if not the best running backs in all the SEC. He's he's coming into South Carolina to lead that room. You bring in Oscar Attaway, somebody that we've talked about quite a bit on here. You look at his numbers, a very solid RB2 that you look at for this room that could be a really good contributor based on his skill set and what Dow Loggins can do with him in this offense. You also bring in Jawarren House, somebody that kind of similarly to what Mario Anderson did, at Newberry, set the world on fire at a lower level. Now, you're much more comfortable bringing in a guy like Jawarren Howell to potentially be your 2 or 3 guy, as opposed to him coming in and having to be your number 1 like Mario Anderson did a season ago. And then you add in Juju McDowell coming back for another year. And I brought this point up before. I know McDowell's, production up to this point in his career hasn't been what people probably have wanted it to be, but you saw little inklings last year that Dow Loggins was starting to use him in a variety of ways that who knows what he could have done in those last couple of games had he been fully healthy. Of course, he has the collarbone injury, ends up sitting out the last half of last season, and we'll see what he does this year. You bring back DJ Braswell, who got a little bit of run last year, had the opportunity to carry the ball a couple times. Actually ended up burning his red shirt in the process. What can he be in year number 2? You bring in a pretty highly touted guy in Matthew Fuller in as a true freshman. So a lot of great options and variety in that running back room, which is, again, many of the reasons why Phil Steele would end up saying something like this in regards to that room being marginally better than it was a season ago. And a lot of why Carolina didn't have as much success on the ground, yes, it does boil down to the fact that your room was not the most complete, but you also didn't have a great offensive line. And it's something that we talked about ad nauseum when covering this team a year ago was the issues up front. And as I've said many times before, I don't care how amazing of a running back you are, if you don't have good lanes to run through, if you don't have holes opening up for you, yeah, you can make guys miss, but that only gets you so far. You got to have the lanes to run through to be an effective running back, especially in the SEC, going up against the big nasties on the defensive line of so many of these teams. And that's something that we hope is going to improve this year, particularly from a health standpoint, because that was a unit that was ravaged by injuries a season ago. It's really starting off with, it started with Jalen Nichols in the offseason. But when you got into the season, you had Cason Henry, who had won the right tackle starting spot, get hurt in game number 1. And really, the dominoes started falling from there. Cason Henry was on the Garnet Trust Hour yesterday talking to Chris. We'll get cut number 11 here, Dave. This is Cason Henry's assessment of the offensive line room this offseason as we get set for the 2024 schedule.
Okay, so I think Coach Teasley did a wonderful job in recruiting this year. The additions of dudes like Torselli and Kamar Bell, like that, like new guys that transferred in, they're fantastic additions. I love all those guys. They're great players. They're going to add fantastic, really good depth, and they are older guys, so they add leadership to the room as well. I think we've got a ton more depth than we did last year. And I think the group skill level the average skill level of the group has risen a lot. So there's a lot of really good players that are going to be fighting to play all the time. There's not going to be a lot of skill drop-off between the first group and the second group. We can both run all the plays. We're both very explosive. As you saw in the spring game, like the both offensive lines are playing pretty well, and we'll get better as the summer goes on. We're working with LT every day. We do about an hour and a half at Indy every single day after the lift. We get in the classroom. We got Quizlets we got to do. We take quizzes. We all know the playbook. We know everything. Like, it's great. And that hasn't happened since I've been here. It was always the older guys know the stuff, and the older guys are going to play, and the younger guys just like kind of watch. But we're integrating the younger guys in everything. A younger guy that's really impressed me is Josiah. Josiah played really well in the spring. I think he's really mature. He's very quiet, and he handles his business with everything. So I think he's going to be a great player for us, and I'm really excited to watch him play too. I think he'll be a big addition to us. But in addition and also Cam Pringle, who I've personally kind of taken on coaching at right tackle. So I'm trying to help him out and stuff when he's coming back from surgery or whatever, like right now. So he's getting back well, and he looks great on the field and everything. I'm trying to teach him what I know so I can help him become a better player when I leave or move on or whatever. So trying to help the younger guys come forward to help us out more in the season. And I think that'll make a great, really gelled, really well-conditioned, strong offensive line group for this year.
So obviously, Casey Henry's not going to get on a public platform and dog the offensive line room and say, man, everything looks terrible. Been playing like crap. This guy's terrible. That guy's terrible. Like, he's not going to do that. Of course, he's going to, hype up and tout what his individual position unit has been doing this offseason. So you do have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt because you're going to have to wait and see what happens when the season finally gets here. But again, if you can just stay healthy, if you can avoid having the litany of injuries, and I'm not discrediting injuries completely, because you're going to have guys that are going to get banged up, guys that may miss a game or two. But if for the most part you can stay healthy on the offensive line, you should be significantly better than you were a season ago. And I'm looking at our guy Mike Uva on Gamecock Central the other week put out his projected two deep for football. And when you look at the offensive line, going to go left to right here, he's got Tree Babalade at left tackle, Kamar Bell at left guard, Rashawn Lee at center, Trevon Ball at right guard, and Casey Henry at right tackle. That is like the perfect mix of experience and young guys that have a lot of upside, right? So you have Rashawn Lee, who again is the anchor of this offensive line, can play multiple positions, but center is obviously where you'd love to have a guy like that. You have Casey Henry, who, despite the fact that he's only played a handful of games in his college career so far, has been around for a while, is somebody that has been so highly touted. I remember back to a season ago when Colin Taylor and I were doing In the Bonus, and he just sang Casey Henry's praises constantly about what kind of offensive lineman that guy was. And again, he won the right tackle job a season ago. The injury prevented him from playing through 95% of the season, but he still won the job. So you have that guy at your right tackle spot. You have a Kamar Bell, somebody that has played a lot of football in his college career. And I know you look at, he came from FAU. That's not as attractive as coming from an Oklahoma or something like that, but still, playing a lot of football is playing a lot of football, and that's somebody that you think can slide in pretty well at that left guard spot. And then you have Tree and Tro, two guys that unfortunately did have to get thrust into starting roles in their true freshman season, but they did a decent job in those roles. There were growing pains. They were coming, obviously learning and coming along, so it wasn't going to be perfect, but you have a year of experience under the belt for both those guys now that is extremely valuable, and I'm very excited to see how they're going to do in year number 2, potentially as starters in this offensive line room. And that's the thing to me. I say that if you can stay healthy, you should just by default be better than you were a season ago. And that's the thing to me. This offensive line does not have to go out there and win the Joe Moore Award or be a finalist or anything like that. They don't have to be regarded as the best offensive line in the country. Just be solid. Just be decent. If you can crack the top 100 in rush yards per game as well as sacks allowed, as far as fewer sacks allowed this upcoming season, because again, Carolina was one of the worst at that last year. We saw that in full display in week number 1 against North Carolina. If you can improve in those areas as well as a few others, this team as a whole and the offense as a whole should be better in 2024. That's the hope, at least. But again, so much hinges on both sides of the football and what happens with the trenches. And if you don't have a good offensive line, you're not going to be very successful, which we saw, unfortunately, on full display for South Carolina a season ago. So, again, this whole conversation started from Phil Steele saying that South Carolina's rushing yard or rushing unit is going to be the best improved in the entire country in 2024. Well, for that unit to improve, there might be some other areas of the offense that regress a little bit, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. We'll get into that coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday morning here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head with you on your Wednesday morning here on The Game. Getting back into our conversation about Phil Steele's thoughts on South Carolina's offense. But first, I want to let you know The Game and Hardee's are teaming up to make sure school students in the Richland 1 and Richland 2 school districts have all supplies they need for the start of the school year. You can help by donating any supplies this Saturday between 2 and 4 p.m. at the Hardee's location at 100 Creech Road out in Blythewood. Elijah from the postgame show going to be hanging out there all afternoon long to collect those school supplies. You also get some coupons as well for some food there at Hardee's as well. So come by and see Elijah this Saturday from 2 until 4 at 100 Creech Road out there in Blythewood. So just talking that last segment that Phil Steele projects that South Carolina's rushing offense is going to be the most improved in college football in 2024, which that's very exciting. Again, something that this team struggled with quite a bit a season ago. To say that, hey, they're going to take leaps and bounds in that area in this next season is great. So you might be a little alarmed when you look directly next to that on his list and see that South Carolina's passing offense is going to be the next worst as far as progression in college football in 2024. As far as his offensive pass units that he thinks are going to improve, he has Iowa, Utah, Syracuse, Ball State, and East Carolina in his top 5. The bottom 5 are Washington, Troy, Louisiana Monroe, South Carolina, and Temple. So he's saying that South Carolina is going to take a pretty significant step back as far as its passing offense goes in 2024. Look at it from this standpoint. You're losing an NFL caliber arm in Spencer Rattler. And that's going to be a regression to a degree, but should it be as far as Phil Steele? And again, Phil Steele is the guru, the expert on all things college football. Should it be as far as he is projecting it to go? Let's look at some numbers here. South Carolina's passing offense was 24th a season ago nationally, averaging 278 yards per game. Again, your running game wasn't really there. You had to rely a lot on what Spencer Rattler did with his arm, and yes, even when Spencer Rattler gets sacked, that also counts as a rush. So, couple that in there as well. And South Carolina gave up 41 sacks a season ago, so that's a significant amount of rushes that add to that chart. We know Lenore Sellers has a strong arm, but we're yet to see it against a high-caliber defense. I mean, he threw touchdowns against Furman. We saw him against Vanderbilt. He's not exactly gone up against a murderer's row when it comes to defenses yet in the SEC. And you also have the big unknown of the wide receiver room at South Carolina as well. Again, like so many other positions, they did a great job in the transfer portal, bringing in guys with different types of skill sets, some of them similar, but really filling out this room after losing Xavier Legette, after losing Juice Wells. The two guys that came into last season as the projected top 2 wide receivers, on this team. So the passing game will still be important, but what we know of the Lenore Sellers skill set is that it's going to be very, very run heavy with what he brings to the table as a quarterback. In fact, Brad Crawford from 24/7 was on the postgame show with Jay and Elijah yesterday. Cut number 14 here, Dave. Here he is talking about what he expects the differences in schemes to be between South Carolina a year ago and this year with Spencer Rattler. Lenore Sellers.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more zone read and option type plays out of this offense. I think for the most part last season and the year before that with Marcus Satterfield, South Carolina tried to keep Spencer Rattler upright as much as possible. He didn't run the ball much. There certainly was not a ton of quarterback design runs. That's going to change a good bit with Lenore Sellers and Robbie Astrup, the Auburn transfer, behind him. I think this offensive staff is going to do whatever it can to keep Lenore Sellers healthy. However, this guy's big, man. He's almost 6'5", 250 pounds. He's going to be able to take a hit, and he's somebody who I think can get 10 to 12 carries a game. Obviously, the backfield is brand new with 3 transfers there. So, South Carolina's going to enter that season opener next month against Old Dominion with, 3 ball carriers that it feels really good about, and a quarterback making his first career start that is a true dual threat, probably the first, the Gamecocks have had in several seasons. So I think he's going to fall short of 3,000 yards passing because I don't think that's the recipe for success for this Gamecock offense. I think you're going to see more balance, maybe 60-40 run pass, and, if these 3 transfers are as good as advertised in the backfield, this running game should be light years better than it has been in recent years.
And it makes perfect sense. Now, Spencer Rattler was athletic and had the ability to use his feet in situations where it was necessary, but that was not his overall game where it came to designed run plays for him here at South Carolina. Again, he used his feet to get out of trouble. More often than not, he was going to sit back there in the pocket, let things develop downfield, try and go through his reads and find somebody down the field. And for reference, by the way, he threw for 3,026 yards in year number 1 and 22 and threw for 3,186 yards last year here at South Carolina. So saying that LaNorris Sellers is going to be under 3,000 yards isn't that crazy of a thing to think about unless he just goes out there and has some kind of insane Cam Newton type of year where he's, running for 100 and throwing for 300 in a game or something like that. That'd be fantastic, but I'm not going to go out there and put that projection on him, necessarily at this point in time. But, again, that skill set that he brings to the table is going to lean that offense more towards being run heavy. Now, Dow Loggins is not going to come out there and say it, but again, when you build the offense based on the skill set of your signal caller, as we know he did a season ago with Spencer Rattler, and as we know he's going to do once again this year with the LaNorris Sellers, that only makes perfect sense. And again, when you're looking at these numbers, Brad Crawford, mentioned it being more of like a 60-40 type of thing now. Last year, South Carolina threw the ball 53% of the time and ran the ball 47% of the time. Now, yes, again, sacks do count towards those run totals, so that number's skewed by even a little bit there. But it was a little bit more of tried to be at least a balanced offense a season ago, where now it's going to be tilted a little bit more towards likely the run game because, again, that's what your complement of skill players on offense leans you to want to do. And hopefully it ends up being very successful, and South Carolina can be one of those units that can run the ball at will and be effective enough when it comes to throwing the ball to still have as much success as they need to. And again, that all comes through LaNorris Sellers. I want to jump back over to Cason Henry really quick here. Cut number 12 here, Dave. This is Cason Henry on the Garnet Trust Hour yesterday, giving his thoughts on what he's seen out of the redshirt freshman quarterback so far this year.
So I think the biggest thing for LaNorris was he was kind of taking a back seat to Spencer earlier in his career, and I think he's really grown into the leadership role this year. During spring ball, he grew exponentially as a leader of the offense in my eyes, and really took command of the offense, and that made me really proud. And he's done a great job so far. We do conditioning with him and stuff. Like, he does all the cadences. He's loud. He takes control. He knows everything down pat. He's about as physically impressive a guy that I've seen in college at this point. Handles everything pretty easy in the weight room. So, he's overall does everything right. You never hear me. He's never on any lists. You never hear anything bad about him. So, that's what you look for out of a quarterback. He's the ideal guy. And I'm excited to block for him this year, and I think he'll do a great job.
And again, Cason Henry's not going to get on here and he's going to dog his quarterback or, quite frankly, any of his teammates, for that matter. So he's saying the right things. And as we've heard all season, all off season long, everybody very high on LaNorris Sellers. Everybody's saying the right things about LaNorris Sellers. He's a leader. He's got the physical skills, the physical tools, all that kind of stuff. He's understanding the offense, all those kind of things. And that's great to hear. We got to see it put on display when the season kicks off on August 31st against Old Dominion and for all the weeks after that. Do I believe that he can do it? Absolutely. And again, this is from my interactions with him being in here and stuff like that. He's a smart kid. Got a good head on his shoulders. He definitely seems to be wise beyond his years. And that's, I think, going to go a long way with how he transitions into the starting role here at South Carolina, that hopefully leads not only himself but this team to a lot of success, not only for this year but for years to come. But a lot of that we do expect is going to come from the ground game. And it's going to be very exciting to see that unit be revamped and hopefully, again, lead to a lot of wins this upcoming season. I want to stick with Brad Crawford and his, conversation with Jay and Elijah yesterday on the postgame show, because it stemmed from an article that he had on 24/7 about 5 bold and 5 conservative predictions for the Gamecocks in 2024. We'll dive into some of what he had to say coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday here in the game. Oh, I always love telling you about my friends over at Twin Peaks. Of course, when football season gets here, you're going to want to make sure you're at Twin Peaks as much as possible. TVs as far as the eye can see to take in all that great action on college football Saturdays as well as on pro football Sundays. But there's never a bad time to be at Twin Peaks. Yeah, we're in the dog days of summer. There's just baseball and, got Copa America going on. Obviously, Wimbledon happening as of right now. Park yourself down there and take it in on all of their fantastic TVs. Next week, get excited for this. It's Bikini Week, the costume party going on all week long at Twin Peaks between the 15th and the 18th, featuring a bikini costume party all week and specials on your favorite summer beverages, including 29-degree draft, keep you cool, fresh and cocktails, and cheap shots. Bring the crew and grab watermelon margarita topped with watermelon Red Bull or a Melargo Silver Pomona to beat the heat as well. All this with our friends down at Twin Peaks in the Vista. Welcome back in. Extra Point here on the game. Tyler Head along with you on your Wednesday. Want to remind you, as always, thanks for checking us out on The Game TV, powered by our friends at Integrated Media and sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass. You can watch us all day long here. Don't forget to subscribe as well and hit the bell icon to stay notified every time we are live or upload a video on our YouTube channel. Continuing on our conversation here, I played a clip from Brad Crawford of 24/7 Sports yesterday when he was on with, Jay and Elijah. And it all comes in reference to this article that he wrote yesterday for his 5 bold and 5 conservative predictions for South Carolina in 2024. There's a lot of interesting takes on here. We'll start off with the first one, that being a bold prediction that he believes South Carolina is going to have a all-SEC linebacker this upcoming season. Cut number 13 here, Dave.
Yeah, it feels like it's been forever, really, almost 2 coaching cycles since the Gamecocks have had a true difference maker at that position. Sky Moore, he was a guy that led the team in interceptions at that one season as an all-SEC player. But I think right now this is the deepest linebacker room South Carolina's had, certainly under Shane Beamer, possibly under the previous regime as well. Bam Martin-Scott's a guy who is going to take a major leap this season into that starting role. Debo Williams obviously is one of the SEC's hardest hitters and has shown flashes in recent years. But the 2 guys I'm looking at, man, are Demetrius Knight, transfer from Georgia Tech, who, Nick Emmanwori has said on social media and various times this offseason that, Demetrius Knight's a guy who is going to be quite impactful at that position. And then Bengali Kamara, a linebacker from Pitt who's been uber productive in the ACC previously. So Gamecocks go about 4 deep at that position, feel really good about it. And I think, Shane Beamer may not have felt that way 5 or 6 months ago when he lost 2 linebackers to the portal. But the 2 guys he replaced them with are pretty darn talented players, and I think it's a position group that is no longer a weakness in Columbia.
And I guess it's bold from the standpoint of, as he mentioned, this is not something South Carolina has been able to say they've done in 7 years as far as first-team All-SEC go, with Sky Moore going all the way back in 2017. But it's not certainly outside the realm of possibility that we could see that happen this upcoming season. I look at a guy like Debo, who, a season ago was 3rd in the SEC in tackles overall, had 9 tackles for losses. If you can have similar numbers to that and get a little bit more involved with getting the quarterback, add a few sacks in there, you might have a shot at being one of those first-team All-SEC types of guys. But like, he mentioned, this was a room that even a season ago where you had Debo, and you had Stone Blanton, and you had Pup Howard coming as a true freshman. It wasn't a room that we were as overly excited about. You kind of knew what you had in Debo, and tackling machine, a guy that, never seemed to leave the field. Stone Blanton was an okay linebacker that a lot of people certainly had issue with, and Pup Howard was somebody that you saw as a big upside that hopefully he was going to come along in time here at South Carolina. Obviously, Stone and Pup Howard have obviously moved on to other SEC schools now, but you've done a really good job. Shane Beamer has, and his coaching staff, of revamping this room, again, like we say, much like about so many other aspects of this team in the offseason, to where, you have Debo back for another season, kind of leading the way there. Bam Martin-Scott, who, of course, we've talked about a lot, came on at the end of last season. Then you add in Demetrius Knight, you add in Bengali Kamara, 2 guys with a lot of upside, a lot of potential for what they could be here, in their first year at South Carolina. And again, I'm not saying all these guys are going to go out there and be first-team All-SEC guys. It doesn't end up working out that way. But you have a very, very good room here that, as Brad Crawford mentioned, they're 4 deep. They're going to be able to rotate, which that should alleviate a little bit on Debo Williams' shoulders, because it seems like, again, he never really left the field last year. So if you can get him a little bit more rest time and be able to rotate him in situationally, that might help him out even more overall as the as the season goes along. One of his conservative predictions was Nick Harbor transforms into wide receiver number 1. To me, that almost kind of teeters on bold a little bit, because while from a physical standpoint and certainly a, recruiting standpoint of being a 5-star guy, saying he's going to become the wide receiver number 1 isn't crazy, but we have to remember, wide receiver is still not a natural position for him. He had a first season at South Carolina. It was okay for the little bit that he did get to play, didn't get to be as involved with the football side of things this offseason because of his track commitment. So I don't know how much true development he's going to have going into year number year 2. Is that something that can change as the season goes along? Certainly. But I would say Harbor transitioning into being your true number 1, that might actually be a little bit more of a bold prediction than a conservative one, because to me, conservative is like not quite a sure thing, but something that is most likely in the realm of happening. And I don't quite know if I'm comfortable saying that yet. If you do, that's fine. I do think we're just going to have to see where he's at and what progression he's made this offseason when the season does finally start, as he's just now getting back into the football side of things after, again, focusing on track and the commitments there throughout the entire offseason. One more we get to. This is another bold prediction. Brett Crawford says South Carolina beats a ranked team this season. I mean, really, when you look at South Carolina's schedule, you're almost going to have to. There's if you want to improve on what you did a season ago and make it back to a bowl game, you are going to have to go through at least one ranked team, more likely than not. And that is being very conservative, because with how good we know the SEC can be, there could be a laundry list of ranked teams that you have to face as the season goes along. He points out that you're likely going to be facing, LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma as ranked teams within that first half of the season. But as you get later on in the year, the A&Ms, the Missouris, the Clemsons, those all could be ranked teams as well, depending on how their individual, seasons are going, obviously. And again, that there's likely, much like the Missouri a season ago, who nobody expected to have a 10-win season like they had, where South Carolina got to them, guess what? They were ranked. So there's always that possibility that you could run into a team that nobody really expected to be a ranked team. By the time you get to them, they could end up, surprising a lot of people. So we'll see what happens. Again, I think that's almost got to be a given, that if you're going to find your way back to a bowl game, back to the postseason, you're going to have to take down at least one, maybe a couple of ranked teams along the way. And again, that's part of the reason why South Carolina, once again, as it seems to be every single year, has truly one of the most challenging schedules in all of college football. And as cliche as it sounds, I'll go into coach speak here. You got to take it one game at a time. And there is nothing more important to me right now. Obviously, you got to beat Old Dominion week number 1. That's, something that we feel like South Carolina should be able to do without too much of a struggle. But that week 2 game against Kentucky, just of abundant importance, because that's one of your swing games. That's one of those games that you look at and say, if Carolina loses this, I don't know if you're able to find those other 6 wins with a lot of confidence on the schedule. Now, again, as the season rolls along, a lot of things can change. This team can be leaps and bounds better than we ever thought it was going to be, and we're having a different conversation in the month of October. But based on what we know about this team right now and the unknowns that we have about this team right now, that game is so huge, because that is a game that, as I've said before, South Carolina fans look at that and say, we should beat them. Kentucky fans look at that and say, we should beat them as well. So it's truly a swing game, and would set you up, if you win that in Old Dominion, as being 2-0 going into that huge Week 3 matchup against LSU coming in to town. So again, if Carolina wants to achieve its goals this year, you're going to have to get through at least one ranked team in the process. And again, something South Carolina has not been able to do since beating Clemson all the way back at the end of the 2022 season after beating Tennessee that week before. They are on a bit of a skid when it comes to losing teams since then. So hopefully they can correct that this upcoming season. We'll come back. We'll wrap up hour number 1. More news on the front of the EA Sports College Football 25 video game. A name that we didn't thought was going to be in it has now reemerged on the rosters. With that coming up, it's the Extra Point here on the game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on the game. We'll let you know, post-game show with Jay and Elijah going to be broadcasting live this Friday from Craft and Draft, 2706 Divine Street, right here in Columbia. One of the 12 locations where you can use your craft beer passport, which, by the way, you can purchase on 1075thegame.com by clicking on the Sweet Deals tab. It's a $360 value, all yours for just $79. And again, you can use it at 12 different locations here around the Columbia area. We are but 6 days away from the first access to the College Football 25 video game for us people that aren't, guests of EA Sports that have gotten to play it and put out content over these past couple of weeks and months. The general public will finally get their hands on it starting on July the 17th with the early release. So if you had if you bought the pre-order, I think the downloading has actually already started because there's so much packed into this game. It does take a little while. If it hasn't already started, it starts this upcoming weekend, so it'll be ready to go when early next week rolls around. And then the official release of the game to everybody else, those that didn't pay for the early access, will be next Friday, July the 19th. And I'm already setting aside a lot of free time to playing this game and getting up to speed on the long awaited return of EA Sports College Football video game. I saw the other day it was the 11-year anniversary of when NCAA 14 released all the way back in the summer of 2013. And that was back when, there was a lot of turmoil around, the game and the fact that it might be running into some trouble with its use of name, image, and likeness of athletes without compensating them at that point in time. But when the game released, there was anticipation that there was going to be an NCAA 15 coming up the next year. And unfortunately, that did not happen. And again, we had to wait 11 long years for the return of EA Sports College Football 25. But I and so many people around the nation are so excited to see it make its return coming up next week and can't wait to get my hands on it and play it myself. One name that we thought we weren't going to see in the game was Arch Manning. For those that don't remember, EA Sports, given the fact that they can now compensate athletes for the name, image, and likeness, opened up for whoever wanted to join in. You can add yourself to the game, and you'll get, I think, was it $500 and a copy of the game? And every athlete that we heard from, every athlete that we talked to here and on the Garnet Trust Hour and stuff said, yes, we are in that. We are going to make sure that we are in the game, and that's a great opportunity for us. The one person, at least publicly, that we know was not participating was Arch Manning, who, of course, is the backup quarterback behind Quinn Ewers out there at Texas, as he claimed it was going to be a distraction from everything else going on in his, his football life, which I always thought was really weird because all you have to do is opt into the game. You put your information into an app, and then they pay you, and that's it. You don't have to play the game. You don't have to, you don't have to be involved with it if you don't want to be. You just give your rights and name, image, and likeness over to the game, and that's it. That's done. And what's done is done. Well, EA Sports has now swayed Arch Manning back in the other direction to the tune of about $60,000 as he appeared with his uncle Eli in a advertisement for the game this week. And in it, it shows that he is indeed a part of the game. So if you're playing with Texas and you want to bench Quinn Ewers, you can put in Arch Manning as the starting quarterback now. And I imagine there'll be a lot of people out there that want to do that just for the sake of playing with the Manning, or maybe trying to sway him to come to your school via the transfer portal if he's not happy with his situation out there at Texas. And it's so funny because, look, he's a Manning, right? Like, that's the reason why we're talking about him. There's no other backup quarterback in the nation that's going to get attention for opting out of a game if his name was Arch Smith or something along those lines. But because he comes from the royal family of football in the Mannings, we're going to pay attention to anything and everything that he does. We don't know how good this guy is. We don't know if he's going to end up being a first overall draft pick or if he's going to end up being another guy that fades into obscurity at the college level. We think there's very good upside and obviously a very high-touted recruit coming out of high school, but we really don't know what Arch Manning is at the college level because he hasn't really gotten ample opportunity to show that. But I go back to our guy Andy Staples, and one of his, predictions for the 2024 college football season, he thinks that, he's predicting at least that Arch Manning will get the opportunity to start some games this season. And that's not from Quinn Ewers playing bad or him getting benched or quarterback controversy or anything like that. But Quinn Ewers has a history of getting hurt. He's missed 5 games in his 2 seasons at Texas so far. So conventional thinking tells you, hey, there's a good chance that he might get hurt again this year or might get banged up this year. If that happens, Malik Murphy was the starter a season ago. When that happened, they're going to turn the reins over to Arch Manning. And what game could that happen in? I don't know. But Arch Manning may have the opportunity to play against a high-level opponent in SEC play to where we're really going to get to see what he's made of. Now, again, it's not the end-all, be-all with what happens in your first start. You can obviously get better from there, but I think we're all so curious to see just how good this guy is should he end up getting the chance to go out there and show it. And again, you don't put all your stock into what happened in game number 1. It does take, time to truly develop an idea of what a quarterback is. But again, I think there's a very good chance we get to see him in meaningful action this year, and we'll start to get an idea at least of what Texas we assume will look like in 2025, assuming that he sticks around. Which again, if he stayed around this long, you would imagine that he's going to stick around to be handed the keys in 2025 after not deciding to transfer out this past offseason. That'll do it for hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Coming up, hour number 2. Big 12 kicking things off as far as media days go out in Las Vegas. We'll hear from Brett Yormark as well as some coaches out there in Big 12 country as they get set for their first year as an expanded conference themselves. That's all coming up. Hour number 2 on the Extra Point here on the game. Oh, every week I come in here and I tell you about our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Last week I was at the Peach Festival in Gilbert on the 4th of July and got a chance to meet some of the folks from Canty. They had a little tent set up out there with all the other vendors. Incredibly nice folks, and I thought that was just a perfect representation of what that company is and what their brand is and what kind of service they can provide for you and your home. And as always, want to remind you to be on the lookout for foundation problems with your home. Things like cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors and windows that might be sticking a little bit, uneven bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you're experiencing any of these issues, any of them at all, you need to check out Canty Foundation Specialist. You can go online and schedule an appointment today at cantycanfix.com. They'll send out one of those kind and trusted professionals to come out to your home, evaluate your foundation issues, and get you and your family fixed up so you can live comfortably going forward. Again, Canty Foundation Specialist online at cantycanfix.com. Welcome back in, Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on the game on your Wednesday. Again, counting down until SEC Media Days gets rocking and rolling out there in Dallas starting next Monday. And again, we'll have Jay, Terry, and Elijah out there all week long, bringing you coverage, grabbing interviews, all that kind of stuff as we do each and every year with SEC Media Day. So certainly looking forward to that. But the Big 12 really gets things rolling as the first conference to have media days. Now that we've got all the realignment stuff buttoned up and all the new teams are in new places, new faces in new places, and all that stuff, the Big 12 kicking things off out there in Las Vegas of all places, actually. And it is ironic considering the fact that the Big 12 took so much of what was left of the Pac-12 and absolved them, basically. The fact that Las Vegas was the site of the final Pac-12 football game of two Pac-12 teams playing each other with Oregon and Washington in the conference championship game a season ago, that is indeed in Allegiant Stadium where Big 12 Media Days is taking place. And, now that the Pac-12 is gone and these new teams find new homes, it's going to be interesting to see where they slide in and how those new teams factor in to being a part of the Big 12. Those new teams being Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and, of course, Colorado, and for those that don't remember, Colorado was the first one. Before the Pac-12 even really fell apart, Colorado was the first one to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and go. And then Pac-12 collapsed, and everybody else said, hey, we'll come too. And the Big 12 was happy to welcome them in. Brett Yormark, who is the commissioner of the conference, as you would expect, touted the conference as we get set to enter this new era. And cut number one here, Dave, he claims they're top three conference in America.
There has never been a better time than right now to be part of the Big 12. We are truly a national conference in 10 states, 4 time zones. And all eyes are now on the Big 12 for all the right reasons. And I think it's safe to say we are more relevant now than ever before. Before I look forward, I'd like to recap where we've been for the last 12 months. Since our last football media day, we added the Four Corners and solidified ourselves as one of the top 3 conferences in America.
That's so funny to me. I like Brett Yormark a lot. Now I'll get to why that is in just a moment. But I respect the humbleness of that kind of statement, because typically, if you're the conference commissioner, you say, "Well, we're the best. We're the best of this. We're the best of that. We are the best conference in America." But everybody and their mother knows that the SEC and the Big Ten are fighting for that best conference in college football, and have been for a very long time. And the Big 12 does not quite stack up. But to say, you know what, we're top 3, I'll take that. We're in the top 75% out of the now Power 4 conferences. He's basically saying, at least we're not the ACC. I'm not looking around at anybody in the Big 12 and seeing them trying to, scale the electric fence on the outside. And we're doing good over here. We're not the ACC. So that is kind of funny. But like I said, I like Brett Yormark when he's not putting his foot in his mouth. Last year at Big 12 Media Days, which of course was the last time Texas and Oklahoma were going to be a part of it as part of the conference, he was very much pushing the anti-Texas Oklahoma rhetoric, saying, well, they're not. He was trying to downplay what they meant to the conference, downplay their accomplishments within the conference, which are ridiculous in hindsight because those are the 2 most successful programs in the history of the Big 12 Conference. And then he had that dumb, quote later on in the year where he was at the Texas Tech, some kind of event with alumni and boosters and all that kind of stuff, and said, "Yeah, I'll be here in Lubbock, or I'll be cheering for Texas Tech in Austin when y'all take on Texas in their farewell game to the Big 12, that didn't end up working out so well. So when he can avoid doing those kind of things, I think he's actually a really good commissioner. And again, he's basically saying that they are still behind the SEC and the Big Ten, which is very much hard to argue with. It's also very hard to argue that they are argue against them being more than stable than the ACC, and they also have a better TV deal as well that's not locked in through 2036, which is why the likes of FSU and Clemson are trying to actively leave the conference as of right now. It does seem like the Big 12 would also welcome in any ACC teams that are attempting to defer themselves from the Atlantic Coast Conference and looking for a new home. So if Florida State were able to escape, and there is some rumblings, there is a little bit of smoke that maybe that could be happening in the possibly very near future, then maybe the Big 12 ends up being the landing spot for the Florida State Seminoles in the future of their of their football endeavors. And what I like about Yormark as a commissioner is he has such a different approach. He's an outside the box type of thinker. And he's done things that have made the Big 12 really stand out. And look, he's with Major League Baseball, he's with NASCAR, like he's done different types of things within the sports world as well that give him a different perspective on things. And that brand of the Big 12 may not mean what it used to, but he's definitely going out of his way to put them in unique situations and present unique opportunities that make them different than everybody else. They inked a new media deal, which, again, it's not what the SEC and the Big Ten are getting, but it's certainly better than the ACC's, and it positions them to improve and add more revenue in the very near future. I believe 2031 is when that deal is up. Again, he opened the door for all those teams that were looking for homes as the Pac-12 was falling apart to happily help replace Texas and Oklahoma. Now, yes, the brands of the Arizona schools, Utah and Colorado do not match what Texas and Oklahoma meant at the conference, but they're solid overall. I wouldn't say they're bottom of the barrel by any means. You have programs like Utah and Arizona that can come in and compete right away. Arizona State and Colorado, teams that may take a little bit of time, but could certainly become contenders themselves. And again, we're talking about this from a purely football standpoint, more than anything else. But nevertheless, he opened the doors for those teams to make their way in. And they're also exploring things in the Mexico market. Now, originally, this was supposed to be for football and basketball. They've since downgraded that to baseball and soccer. But nevertheless, they're trying to bring college sports to a segment of people that don't get exposed to it. And what could that mean for the Big 12 Conference? I do think that's really, really interesting. And they also might actually end up leading the way in private equity as well. Let's go with cut number 3 here, Dave. This is Brett Yormark talking about private equity and its place in college sports.
I'm not going to get into too much of a conversation on private equity, but as I said earlier, we're exploring all options. I do believe that given where we are, the industry, having a capital resource as a partner makes a ton of sense. That's really how you conduct good business. I really believe that. And if you see where private equity is kind of making a path into professional sports, at some point in time it's going to come here into collegiate athletics. So we are exploring what that might look like. And a structure and a model of what that looks like is going to be critically important so that we're not compromising the long-term future of the conference. And we have surrounded ourselves with subject matter experts as we vet out the possibilities. And whatever we do is going to have to benefit the conference both short-term and long-term, provide optionality for our schools. We're not there yet. But we are exploring the different options and the different structures that best suit our conference and our schools.
I know a lot of people don't want to see private equity make its way into college football, but it's something that is on the table as of right now. And this is per Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, who noted yesterday there's support for a league-wide private equity deal that would dole out about $50 million in additional revenue to each school that may also require an extension of the grant of rights. There's a lot of hurdles to jump through with that, so that's not a guarantee. But again, he's looking at different ways to bring in revenue outside of the primary way, which is the media rights deal, which, again, they are significantly behind the SEC and the Big Ten, but they're trying to find ways to close that gap, much like what they are attempting to do with Allstate and the naming rights to the Big 12. Remember that from a couple of weeks back, where the Big 12 was willing to sell their naming rights to Allstate Insurance to become the Allstate 12 or the Big Allstate or something along those lines in terms of having a branded conference, which is something that we've never seen in college football. But I guarantee you, if the Big 12 pulls this off, and I don't know if it would happen before this season or if that's something we'd have to wait for 2025, I guarantee you just about every other conference is going to fall in line with that. Maybe not to the same degree. Maybe you have the SEC presented by something, but sponsorships on the conference itself would become probably the norm across college football if the Big 12 is the first to let that domino fall. So again, they're leading the way in a lot of unique things that other conferences in college football either haven't thought of or just aren't doing as of yet, which again, when you know you're not one of the top two, this is how you set yourself apart. This is how you make yourself unique. This is how you make people interested in what you're doing by being an outside the box type of thinker. And I think that sets the Big 12 up for a lot of success in years to come. But the burning question has to be now, okay, your top dogs are gone. Texas and Oklahoma have left. So who gets to rule the conference now that your longstanding Blue Bloods have moved on to the SEC? And I think what it sets up for is what might be one of the most wide open conferences that I think we've ever seen in college football, at least in recent memory. We'll dive into that a little bit more coming up. Let's hear from some of the coaches that spoke at Big 12 Media Days, day number 1 as of yesterday. That's coming up here in just a moment. Reminder, as always, you can download the 107.5 The Game app from the App Store or the Google Play Store, and listen to us wherever you go. Take us with you across state, across the country, across the world. You can never be without 107.5 The Game with the 107.5 The Game app. More on the Big 12, hearing from coaches as we figure out who the contenders are going to be in that conference that now really stretches coast to coast. It's coming up. Extra Point here on The Game.
So as you can tell, 2024-25 will be a very exciting year for the Big 12. On the football front, we will be the deepest conference in America. Every week will matter. I'm going to say that one more time. We will be the deepest conference in America, and every week will matter.
Welcome back in. Next Point. Tyler Head with you here on The Game on your Wednesday. That again was Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark yesterday, talking about his new, now 16-team Big 12 getting set for 2024 as they transition away from Texas and Oklahoma, welcome in all the schools that have left the sinking ship that was the Pac-12, and how that's going to end up being for this first year of football. And, you know, he's touting the Big 12 as the deepest conference, and a lot of people disagree with that. I think he has a point to a degree. Now, is it the toughest conference? It's not. But when you talk about the sheer amount of teams within the Big 12 that could potentially be in the running to win the conference itself, I do think that is actually pretty significant. It's truly probably the most wide open conference, certainly this year, but certainly one of the most wide open ones we've seen in recent years. And to me, the curiosity of the unknown with this new Big 12 is what creates so much intrigue for me. You know, I look back at last year, the final season of the Pac-12 as it ended up being, there were so many good teams in the Pac-12 going into last year with Oregon, with Washington, with Utah. We thought Southern Cal was going to be good. They didn't end up being all that great, but you had a nice little mix of teams. Arizona actually ended up kind of coming out of nowhere and surprising a lot of people. You had a lot of good teams last season. I was very compelled to see how the season was going to unfold. Washington State was good at the beginning of the year. Oregon State, a solid team. Like, I was intrigued to see how it was going to unfold, and it created probably the most fun I had watching Pac-12 football in quite a while. Unfortunately, it ended up being the final season for them. But again, it was a fun season to follow all the way through. And I think the Big 12 is kind of shaping up to be the same way because, again, they've lost the two most successful programs in the history of the conference. Since the year 2000, there have only been 7 years where the conference has seen somebody other than Texas and Oklahoma claim the conference championship. Now, yes, that did include 2 out of the last 3 with Kansas State and Baylor, but still, those top 2 in the Longhorns and the Sooners had such a stranglehold on the conference itself. Now they're gone. And now it's truly just like open season. Who is going to emerge? Who is going to be the next top team? And can anybody replicate that dominance that those 2 teams showed, whether it be about one team individually or a couple of teams that consistently stay at the top of the conference? I want to hit cut number 6 here. This is Mike Gundy, head coach at Oklahoma State, on his thoughts if he thinks anybody will be able to dominate the conference like the 2 departing schools were able to do for so long.
That's a great question. I don't know that any of us will be able to read into that at this point. We're learning about the new teams that are coming in. In my opinion, as we move forward, there's going to be a lot of parity. I should say more parity in college football than there has been over the last few years. If revenue sharing takes effect, I would guess that most schools in this league will distribute money somewhat equally to football. The direction we're going, that's going to determine the type of players that you have in your organization, whether we like it or not. Recruiting is still recruiting, but it won't be as much recruiting as now. It will be the ability to distribute money to the right players that you need based on the talent that you think that you've seen at that particular time. I think that we've got a number of teams in this league that have an opportunity to make a move national. Whether anybody can take over and dominate for an extended period of time would be hard to tell at this point.
And I think he's right on that, especially with what today's age of college football is, with player movement, with NIL and all that kind of stuff. I don't think anybody's going to be able to position themselves to have the same kind of stranglehold that, the top 2 schools in Texas and Oklahoma had over this league for so long. And from a competition standpoint, that's a good thing, because that creates, again, this wide open element to your conference every single year. Now, yeah, you're going to have the teams like Utah, the teams like Oklahoma State that are going to be consistently towards that top, but I'm not going to sit here and say that, those are going to be the same two teams representing the conference in the championship game, every year or more often than not. And I do think it's truly going to be very wide open. Speaking of Utah, by the way, they are no strangers to joining new conferences under head coach Kyle Whittingham. Cut number 5 here, Dave. Here is Coach Whittingham on his experience jumping to a new conference. 5.
Yeah, it's a transition we have made before, although when we went to the Big 12 or the Pac-12, we were a G5 school trying to come up a level, which there was a little bit of a curve there that we had to endure. This is actually the 4th conference I've been in since I've been at Utah. We were in the WAC, then the Mountain West, and the Pac-12, now the Big 12. So nothing new for me personally as far as changing leagues, but we feel like we've got a roster that's equipped to compete right away. Obviously, I guess the media feels the same way, being picked as the favorite, and I think that's a show of respect to our players and coaches that have done a great job competing through the years that the media has selected as number 1. But in the final analysis, that doesn't mean anything. Obviously, you got to play the games, and our players are fully aware of that. But again, it's a nice show of respect for our program from the media.
So again, he's no stranger to this. As you mentioned, they went from the WAC to the Mountain West Conference during his time there as an assistant. Then when he was a head coach after taking over for Urban Meyer, they went from the Mountain West Conference to the Pac-12 in 2011. And, it took them a little while to kind of find their footing out there. But over the past handful of years, they've consistently been one of the best programs in the Pac-12, including those 2 back-to-back trips to the Rose Bowl that, unfortunately, if Cam Rising is maybe healthy there, they might actually have a shot at winning those games. And obviously he was out the entire year last year, which was a detriment to them as well. But he does seem to be healthy, and he is coming back for his 7th year of eligibility, believe it or not. I think he actually has the ability to come back for an 8th year if he wants that. That would be absolutely insane. But Utah is in a rare space of coming into a new conference and being picked by most people to actually win the whole thing. And the Big 12 releases their media poll at the beginning of the week, as opposed to like the SEC that does it at the end of the week. And Utah is actually the team that ends up being at the top. So out of all the votes, they got the most first-place votes, just narrowly edging out Kansas State, where a lot of the people that cover this conference believe that Utah's going to be able to come in and win the whole thing in year number 1, which would mean punching their ticket to the college football playoff. For as much as Utah has flirted around that with being in the Pac-12, they've never been able to actually compete in the college football playoff. But, of course, they win the Big 12. That would end up changing this year. And they're obviously going to be the most physical team. The Big 12 is not known for its great defenses, but Utah, at least in their regard, will be able to change that to some degree, as they're going to come in there, they're going to knock you around, they're going to punch you in the mouth for 4 quarters, because that's just the kind of football that a Kyle Whittingham coach team ends up playing. And you obviously have the most tenured and experienced head coach I guess now he's right level with, he'd have 1 more year than Mike Gundy would have, but one of the most tenured coaches in all of college football, with Kyle Whittingham having been there for basically 20 years now, coming in to join yet another new conference. So they're an easy pick to be at the top. But Oklahoma State is definitely been the best team not named Texas and Oklahoma in the history of the Big 12 since the late 90s. They've averaged 9 wins a year under Mike Gundy. The big question for them is, can they avoid a bad loss? Because for every time they can take down an Oklahoma or a Texas and beat those teams that maybe you think that they're not as good at, they go out there and get completely steamrolled by UCF like they did a season ago. Like, those are the kind of things that are a signature of a Mike Gundy team that they got to avoid if they want to be the consistent championship team in this new Big 12. What about Chris Kleiman and Kansas State? They're 2 years removed from a conference championship. They always have a really, really good defense, and they're just a quietly consistent team out there in Manhattan, Kansas. Lance Leipold, speaking of Kansas, by the way, has got the Jayhawks cooking. This was a program that many people had left for dead and thought would never be able to even enter a championship conversation ever again. And Lance Leipold has come in and done a fantastic job. It gets Jalen Daniels back at quarterback this year. Probably one of the more exciting guys in all of college football. If he can stay healthy this entire year, that Kansas team can be really, really good. I mentioned Arizona a few minutes ago. Last year, they surprised a lot of people with what they were able to do out in the Pac-12. You have Noah Fafita back for another year. He decided to stick around even after their coach left to go coach at Washington. So that's a team that can come in and be in the mix right away. Neil Brown, who we thought was going to get fired last year at West Virginia, coached his way off the hot seat, got the team to 9-4, and they very well could be a sleeper contender in the Big 12 this season as well. UCF loaded up in the transfer portal, including bringing KJ Jefferson in to play quarterback. Gus Malzahn, obviously a very good, very experienced head coach, so there's no telling if they could make some serious noise as well. So again, this goes back to my main point. The Big 12, that's basically half the league right there, is wide open, and you just don't truly know which of these teams is going to be competing for the conference championship in Dallas at the end of the season, as well as punching their ticket to the college football playoff, whether it be through just winning the conference championship or maybe making one of those at-large bids as well. So I don't know about you, I'm really going to enjoy watching Big 12 football this year and kind of learning what this new conference is going to be and what its identity is going to be now that Texas and Oklahoma have moved on to the SEC. Checking the date, it is indeed Wednesday. That means we got some racing to talk about. Jen Jensen was in attendance for the Chicago Street Race this past Sunday. She got a little wet. We'll get her thoughts on that and break down what happened out there in the streets of Chicago on the next segment there as we talk racing with Jen Jensen, as we do each and every week here in the Extra Point in the Game.
Alex Bowman has won at Chicago.
Hell yeah, buddy! That's what I'm talking about. Hell of a job, brother. Awesome job.
Oh, no. The celebration into the wall, but Alex Bowman's happy.
Welcome back in Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. That was the call. NBC Sports late on Sunday evening as Alex Bowman takes the victory in the second ever Chicago street race through the streets of Chicago in Grant Park. And Erlen Jen Jensen joining me. She does each and every week to talk a little bit of racing. Was in attendance for that event for the second year in a row. And Jen, I feel like I need to apologize for you to you straight off, because last week I touted how great the weather was looking, and it was until it wasn't, and it immediately rained as they were trying to start the race once again.
It was so frustrating, and we were sitting by a couple people who had never been to a race before. They were clueless, and the wife kept saying, "When are they going to start?" It's like, okay, well, I just heard that like there was a little bit of rain in turn 11 or something. So they never ended up staying and watching the race, so they missed out because there was some really good racing. But yeah, it was very frustrating when the rain came in pretty heavy.
Well, and mentioning what you said about sitting next to people that were attending their first race ever, that's the real unfortunate part about this whole thing, because this is an event that NASCAR is bringing to people that don't typically watch the sport, people that don't typically attend their races, to try and welcome them in and create new fans out of it. So when you have people, as well as people watching on TV, they're compelled by the fact that NASCAR's racing through a major city street, that, you know, tuned in at 5 o'clock on Sunday to watch this race, and as soon as they see it's raining, they're like, well, you know what, I'm going to go find something else to do. And the rating still ended up being good, but you're still missing out on a lot of people that were turning off their TVs or just leaving the event in general that didn't get that chance to experience it, which again is what all this is for.
Yep, absolutely. And in the there's a big fan area before you would go through the gates to actually, you know, get in. So the big free fan area where they had NASCAR simulator. There were lots of local vendors. There were cars that were on display, just really to engage people who may not be fans, but really trying to get them involved. I know Bubba Wallace had Bubba's Block Party. So that was a big event that was held in Chicago, and a lot of new eyes. You know, I heard a couple of people around that's like, you know, man, this is awesome. So it was fun to see new people at the event for sure. Just again, it's like, should they just start issuing ponchos with tickets, because that seems to be the trend?
Maybe so. So ignoring the rain, talking about the actual quality of the race on the track as well as the event overall. And anytime you do something for the first time, there's going to be kinks. You have to work out things that you're going to try and do better the second time. So compared to what you experienced a year ago, how did year number 2 stack up?
You know, I think overall with the event, there were some changes they made that I thought were good. And as far as the racing itself, I thought the racing was good. And again, when you're dealing with water, I think it was good racing. There were good, you know, passes. We were in the spot between turns 1 and 2, a little closer to 2, so we could see them really diving in, and that was really fun to watch that, because then there was that long stretch kind of along Lakeshore Drive that they headed into. And I just felt like, yeah, it was really racy. I loved, again, that we had the opportunity to get the wet tires, the rain tires, or whatever we call them, get some use out of those as well. So I thought it was real good racing.
Well, 2 of the heavy hitters that actually ended up dominating the race on Saturday, the Xfinity race, great compelling battle between SVG and Kyle Larson, ended up being the bottom 2 finishers on Sunday when both those guys ended up crashing out. And when they both went out, that really opened things up for a lot of possible winners out there. And lo and behold, Alex Bowman, who has long been that 4th guy at Hendrick Motorsports, not quite measuring up to what his teammates have accomplished these past couple years, finds his way to get victory lane. First time since Las Vegas at the beginning of 2022. And you got to give him credit. He went out there and outdrove the likes of Brad Hand, was able to hold off Tyler Reddick in those last couple laps. Like, he really went out there and earned that win on Sunday.
Man, absolutely, because Reddick is so strong. Like I said, Hand is strong, even though he's older and isn't in the car as often. He's really good on road courses. Ty Gibbs is. So, yeah, he made it, and even though he irritated Bubba Wallace earlier in the race, and there's a little bit of payback on the cool down lap. But aside from that, no, it was great. And Bowman's coming back too because he had that broken back. So what an exciting time for that team.
Did you get any reaction from the people around you when he said he was potentially going to be waking up naked on his hotel room floor after celebrating on Sunday night?
I did not. I did not hear any feedback on that. So interesting thought, and I'm sure that if there was a cleaning crew at that hotel watching, they'd have been like, rock, paper, scissors on who cleans this room.
I was going to say knock twice before you enter on that one for sure. But you mentioned that contact with Bubba Wallace earlier on in the race where Bowman said he was trying to adjust his wiper and ended up getting into him. And, Bubba understandably was frustrated after the race and kind of gave him what I call a hip check that ended up bouncing Bowman into the wall. And there's been a lot of conversation this week about the discipline on that. The news actually coming out a little bit earlier on this morning that Bubba was fined $50,000, which it's kind of one of those things like, yes, that's a lot of money to you and I, but for a race team and for a race car driver, that's kind of chump change to a degree. He didn't get a points penalty, didn't get suspended or anything like that. I think it's kind of one of those, you got to penalize him some kind of way, so just hit him with the money fine and let's move on, because I really think this kind of got blown out of proportion by a lot of people this week waiting for something to happen. I'm glad it's kind of over and done with, and we can move on to Pocono now.
I agree. And even Bowman had said, I understand him being mad. I don't think there really should be any penalties. It was my mistake 100%. And, he understood the pushback. So, yeah, I'm glad that moving on and can now focus on Pocono. But I'll tell you what, Kyle Busch, top 10 finish for him. That was a good week for him because, boy, he struggled as of late.
He has needed something to bring positive energy to that team for a long time. And, yes, finishing ninth is not something that Kyle Busch should usually be excited about. But given how bad that team has been this year, that is something they'll certainly take.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe they can get some momentum off this because I'm a little bit concerned about the team for sure.
So as we look ahead to the future of this event, we've had 2 years in the books. Obviously, rain has plagued both events. What is the future of this event? What is the buzz in the city coming away from year number 2? It seems like the mayor is on board with continuing this. Maybe they try it on a different date, but it seems like something that both NASCAR and the city do still want to continue to pursue.
I think from anything that I was hearing, and of course, family who lives up there, so they see Chicago news all the time, they were saying that there didn't seem to be quite as much pushback. People seem to kind of be looking forward to it a little bit more. It wasn't the new animal. And any reports I was seeing, everybody's really excited about it. Now, I will say where we were sitting, the seats were not as packed as they were last year, but in looking at some of the coverage, there were other areas that were completely full. So, I don't know that our area not being as full, maybe that wasn't a good barometer. But overall, I still felt like there was really good coverage and really good feedback from the event. So, I don't know. I'm hopeful.
And, it's interesting because NASCAR has talked about wanting to bring this to different types of cities, but I just look at the quality of racing we got and the way the course lays out. I feel like Chicago is the perfect place for it because the way you can race around Grand Park, where you can, section that portion of the city off, the way that the turns are designed for the course that they put up there. Like, I don't know if you can go to Denver and have the same kind of race or the same kind of success because, again, Chicago just seems almost kind of like the perfect place for it.
Yeah, it really is. The layout is perfect for the track itself, for the fan events. It just works beautifully. There are so many hotels and stuff that are within walking distance. So it just, as a whole, I think it's a really great venue. The city is itself.
Well, it's an exciting event, and hopefully if you make the returning year number 3, maybe you bring all the rain gear this time, and that, reverses the luck on it to where it's just sunny the entire race.
I tried that. We actually did not come prepared, so I had put in an order when we saw what the forecast was and walked down to a Target and got the ponchos. So I thought, well, maybe that would do it. And no, it didn't work either. So not sure what the answer is.
They say third time's the charm, so maybe next year's the answer.
Let's hope. But overall, it was a great experience. I'm thrilled with the racing, thrilled with the event.
Well, again, hopefully year number 3 is a whole lot better and you can stay dry next time. But we'll talk to you again next week. We'll look ahead to Pocono and the upcoming 2-week break as the Olympics get closer and closer as well. So appreciate it as always, Jen.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks so much, Tyler.
And that's Jen Jensen in attendance for the Chicago Street Race this year. And we'll see if she goes back next year for hopefully some better weather there. Reminder, once again, the game and Hardee's are teaming up to make sure school students here in the Richland 1 and Richland 2 school districts have all the school supplies they need for the start of the school year. You can help by donating any supplies that you may have this Saturday between 2 and 4 p.m. at the Hardee's location at 100 Creech Road out in Blythewood. Postgame shows Elijah Campbell will be out there from 2 until 4 collecting school supplies. Also get some Hardee's coupons as well. So come by and see Elijah, give away some school supplies, and just hang out and have a good time. So again, that's coming up Saturday at 100 Creech Road out there in Blythewood. We'll come back. We'll assess some of what Mike Gundy had to say about the potential suspension or discipline of his star player out there at Oklahoma State. That's coming up. It's the game. It's the Extra Point here on the Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head, along with you here on the game, wrapping up hour number 2. Coming up next, of course, the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Myself, Wes, and Chris will dive back more into Phil Steele and his projections for South Carolina in 2024, as well as what Darren Usher has already done in basically less than a day on the job as South Carolina's Director of Player Personnel and Recruiting. Want to get back into talking about Big 12 Media Days, where we heard from roughly half the coaches in the Big 12 yesterday. You're going to have coaches like Dion and stuff talking a little bit later on today, which will be interesting to hear from them. But Mike Gundy ended up stealing the headlines in reference to his star running back, Ollie Gordon, who was recently arrested for a DUI. And, you know, when those kind of things happen, players typically face discipline within the team. Mike Gundy made it clear that he was not going to be suspended and that he brought Ollie Gordon to media days so he'd have to, you know, face the questions, face the media, and have to own up to everything that he did. That's all fine and well. The more Gundy talks, though, the more he seems to put his foot in his mouth at times. Let's go with cut number 9 here, Dave. Mike Gundy, in good faith trying to talk about Ollie Gordon, ends up with one of the more perplexing comments of the day in reference to his thoughts on the situation.
So the college football is changing, we all know. And we can say these guys aren't employees, but they're really employees. These guys get paid a lot of money, which is fine. But there needs to be a side to what they do that they have to be able to, for lack of a better term, face the music and own up to things. And when I looked at it, I thought, okay, I'm going to be real honest with myself first and then make the best decision for what I think is good for Ollie, our university, and our team. And then I start thinking about being a parent. I have a 28, I have a 23, and a 19. And first I thought, okay, so I looked it up on my phone. What would be the legal limit? Like in Oklahoma is 0.08, and Ollie was 0.1. So I looked it up, and it was based on body weight. Not to get into the legal side of it, but I thought really 2 or 3 beers or 4. I'm not justifying what Ollie did. I'm telling you what decision I made. Well, I thought I've probably done that 1,000 times in my life. And I, you know, it's just fine. So I got lucky. People get lucky. Ollie made a decision that he wished he could have done better. But when I talked to Ollie, I told him, I said, you're lucky you got out light because you make a lot of money to play football. So back in the day, being able to cover the cost of what he's going to go through would be difficult for a college player. It's not for him.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not speaking for him, but I'm just saying that's not an issue for him. So nobody got hurt. I said, we see people doing this and people losing their lives across the country, not just football players, but everybody. So you got out lucky.
You know how all college football coaches now have the get back guy to where when they're on the sidelines and they're locked in on, you know, yelling at the guys on the field and coaching and all that kind of stuff, they got the guy that grabs them by the belt loop and yanks them back so they're not standing on the field when the plays are happening. I feel like Mike Gundy needs the equivalent of that when it comes to talking to the media, talking into a microphone, whatever it may be, because he starts off in a good place. But the longer he talks, the worse it tends to get because, again, he's saying, hey, Ollie Gordon made this mistake. I brought him to media days. He's going to own up to this. He's going to have to face the music and face the questions from the media, all that kind of stuff. That's all fine and good. And, you know, talks about his kids and all that kind of stuff where he doesn't want one mistake to ruin somebody's career, which I can agree with. That's fine. But then the more he talks, he gets into, well, you know, hey, I did my research on what the legal limit is, and I did that 1,000 times, which, again, that's a completely made-up number. If you're going to throw out a hypothetical, though, I probably wouldn't go with 1,000 for something like that. Maybe something a little more conservative. You know what I mean? So, and look, this is not, I'm not out here trying to get him canceled or something like that, saying, oh, well, they should fire Mike Gundy for saying something like that and admitting to you know, driving drunk 1,000 times or whatever it may be. Like, I'm not going down that path, and I don't really think anybody else is, but it's one of those things that it's like if you would have had 2 minutes to think about your answer, you probably wouldn't have gone along and said something like this. And Gundy tweeted out after the backlash last night, my intended point today at Big 12 Media Days was that we are all guilty of making bad decisions. It was not a reference to something specific. And again, that is a good point to make. Like, we all have done dumb things. Now, again, I don't condone anybody going out there and driving after drinking to any degree. But the point that he's making of, hey, we don't need to ruin someone's career because of one mistake, I can get behind. And I think a lot of people can get behind. But the way he went about conveying that message was certainly not the most advantageous, I would say. So, again, Gundy, great football coach. You know, again, Oklahoma State's going to be one of those teams that's going to be competitive in the Big 12 for years and years to come. Just may need a little more refining when it comes to some of these statements that he puts out, especially on sensitive topics like the one revolving around Ollie Gordon and his DUI. But no suspension for him. He's going to be able to play. It does help that they're playing the FCS defending national champions in South Dakota State, where they may need Ollie Gordon and all that he can bring to the table to be able to beat that team. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll dive into what Darren Usher is doing in day number 1 on the job, as well as the latest on Phil Stilt's projections for South Carolina in 2024. That's next here on The Game.
Hey, did you know that only approximately 7% of roofers nationwide are GAF certified, which means that if you need somebody to take a look at your roof, is it damaged? Is it time to replace it? You know, you definitely need to replace it because there's been some type of damage or it's just old in age.